for these sanctions would, incidentally, for the 9 years that Israel tried with three successive prosecutors to blackmail, harass, and sting them to prevent them from taking these actions.
Reed Brody, we thank you very much for being with us. Veteran war crimes prosecutor, board member of Dawn, the nonprofit which has filed the communication with the ICC prosecutor over the role of U.S. officials, Biden, Blinken, and Austin, in supporting Israeli war crimes in Gaza. That does it for our show. Democracy Now! Is produced with Renee Pels, Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Messiah Rhodes, Nermeen Sheikh, Maria Tarasena, Tammy Warnoff, Tarina Nadura, Anjali Khamet, Sam Alcoff, Tameria Astugio, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Hani Masood, Hannah Ilias. Our executive director is Julie Crosby. Special thanks to Becca Staley, John Randolph, Paul Powell, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez for another edition of Democracy Now!
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of The Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 98.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. I got a great program today. Let me introduce my co-host, the team members today. Yusef Mgeni, Ndugu Yusef Mgeni is here, and Jonathan Palmer, my running buddies, guys that go back with me a long way in community service, and a newer member of our team, Haley Taylor Schlitz, Esquire, a young attorney, assistant attorney general at the state of Minnesota, and columnist for Insight News. And we're going to have a special program today, a wide variety of topics we're going to go over. They include a report on Democracy Now! About Trump moving to abolish the Department of Education and his broader attacks on public schools. We're going to talk about John Hope Bryant's comments on whether or not DEI is dead. He's suggesting that Black people are having the wrong argument, and maybe it's time to get over DE&I. Finally, we want to talk about civil rights groups suing the Trump administration over anti-equity executive orders. That's a lot. We're going to begin with a special guest, Crystal Stein. If I'm saying that right, Crystal, you help me. And thank you and welcome to the program. Crystal is a Minnesotan who left a successful career in finance to launch Beret Publishing Company this February during Black History Month. So this is a passion product that's dedicated to storytelling, music, and creativity. Beret Publishing highlights diverse cultural contributions through multisensory children's books, including music, books, video, and braille. Her goal is to celebrate hidden stories that inspire and connect communities, making literature more inclusive for all kids, including blind children, and especially Black and Brown children. The project features music by Black composers like George Bridgetower, who work with Beethoven as one example. Well, we'll learn more about that. Crystal, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, team. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here and hang out with us as long as you can today. We welcome your presence and your voice. But we want to start by lifting up Beret Publishing. Am I pronouncing it properly?
That is perfect. Yes, you're spot on.
Well, let's do Beret Publishing 101. Tell our viewers and our listeners here on KFAI about you and your company.
Well, again, my name is Crystal Stein. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you guys. I am actually originally from Queens, New York, and I live in Minnesota with my husband and 2 young children, which is essentially kind of the genesis of where Beret Publishing began. So our firstborn was born during COVID. when, ourselves, like many across the world, were, indoors and trying to figure it out. So we had a young baby in 2020. And I myself, having mentioned that I'm from Queens, New York, was born into an immigrant family. So I had a grandmother, my late grandmother, she died shortly after 9/11, came to the United States with a third grade education, and raised myself, my brother. And
From
some
where? Where did your great grandmother come from?
St. Vincent, yeah, small island, yeah,
Okay.
St. Vincent and the
Okay.
Grenadines.
Okay.
And yeah, so she gave us everything that she could, right? She wasn't able to write on her own. I was the young one who had to fill out all the documents and sign everything. She could only sign documents with an X. So I know that she poured everything and all into us, which I was able to transform into a beautiful career, which I'm certainly grateful for, having the better part of the last 2 decades refining and rising to what I would describe as the top of the mountain, only to find that in 2020, when we were all kind of forced to a space of silence and focus and intrinsic kind of self-awareness, and especially for those of you who are parents or to be parents, or an aunt or uncle to some degree with children that you're close to, really taking a look at how you can be the best version of yourself for these little people who are truly the future. And so that for me was when the pull started to kind of tug away at me, and that, I was reminded of that young girl in Queens. And, as a new mom, I was giving my children everything, or my son at the time, I didn't have 2 at the time, but, Beethoven, Chevalier, Chopin, all the things that I didn't have as a young person. But it made me take pause, because I was wondering, where were the people that looked like me? Where were the brown, the Black people? Where was the representation? Because there is no way that we have these juggernauts, and not to take away from their incredible contributions to art and to the world as it's been shaped today. But who else was there? So I started to pull that thread, and Beret just essentially poured out. Yeah.
Phenomenal. Do we have images, Jared, of your book or any of your titles yet? I'm not sure if we do, to share or to show.
I have some here. If it,
Yeah, let's try to sell some books.
So here we have so there's 5 composers in this first cohort. They span between the 15th and the 19th centuries.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I went this far back is because it was of great significance to me that we start somewhere along the line where greatness just poured out of people of color. It doesn't start in, cotton fields. It doesn't begin when someone else tells us, let's find out the cold hard facts. So this name might be familiar to some folks. His name was Yusef Mgeni, prior to becoming knighted as Chevalier. And a few key things about all of my books in this collection. They all have Braille. Okay, so we are bridging the gap between populations of individuals, young and old, okay, that learn in a different way. So to expand my mind around how can I get these pieces of work, these stories that have been forgotten, into as many hands as possible, that was certainly something that was quite special ad that doesn't exist, actually, frankly, for every bookstore that I've walked into. So you'll find the Braille there. There's beautiful art. Another thing that you'll find actually in the body of these books is music. Okay. So I worked with celebrity producer in LA to have these remade. And oftentimes, when going back this far, you'll find that a lot of these composers had many of their life's work destroyed. So like the Napoleons of the world, would hold burnings. I mean, we're talking about real life history here, burnings, and saying to these people, folks will never know your name. They'll never know what you contributed to society. And it's simply because of who they were, but it's not true. You see pockets of individuals trying to bring stories back to life. So with Beret, I am honing in on that focus and being hyper laser focused on a succinct way of getting those names out. And it's starting with children's literacy. Okay. One last thing that I want to point out about these books that are quite special is there's always 4 themes. And so when you think about what's important, to children and Black children, brown children, people of color, just generally, it's often not shown. There's 4 common themes that I've added. 1, I always show the children with their parents, strong parental figures, okay? Because we're not alone, and as much as history was able to lend information to say whether it was both parents present or we know something, if anything, about one of them, I brought them to life in these books, okay? I always show the children studying. We're talking about the best of the best, creme de la creme individuals of their time. So to be child prodigies, what does that mean? It's not something that just, you wake up and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go play Carnegie Hall. That's not how it works. You truly have to study. You have to hone in on your craft, and you have to have the support because it truly does take, a village, right, to bring all of that together. Another theme that I always show are the young children playing, having fun. Like, I can't recall how many times I've seen books where, I see little Black children studying or playing or just being kids, and so that was of the utmost importance to me. And then I always show them on their big day, right? So we're talking about stages, world-renowned stages that these individuals have played on, right? So like, for example, Chevalier, the Paris Opera. Okay, so these are the books that we have here. They are available for sale. And the call to action is truly to get these pieces of work, these stories into as many hands as possible. So
you had an accounting career, I think, or is that what finance career? What's your own story? What's your path?
My origin story before this.
your professional development story.
Yeah.
Schooling, etc.
Yeah. So I actually have an undergrad and 2 master's degrees. Okay. So for the most part, there was one blimp. I'll explain the blimp. Has been steeped in financial services. And one of my master's programs actually honed in on information systems, where I was able to really get really, really good at in the technology space very early on. So I ended up getting recruited to a Big 4 shortly after, them finding out that I had kind of this diversified background, be it junior at the time in technology and finance, and the rest was history. It actually went off and into the consulting space, where I've spent the better part of the last 2 decades just leaning in and enjoying it actually too. I really do love the fintech space. I have a particular set of skills in a very niche area, and one of my greatest bodies of work have just been able to serve people in that way. But now I want to serve them in a different way. As I said, it's a calling at this point, because for me, when it became surface, when I realized it was more surface than substance, that switch just finally happened. Yeah.
I want to come back to the questions that you've caused me to think of in hearing your story. Those you've simply opened my curiosity about what it means to have specialized and had success in the finance sector. Let me bring in one of our other colleagues, Haley Taylor Schlitz. And gentlemen, let's sort of stand by for a second, because I want to elevate and celebrate these phenomenal women's voices. And Haley, one of the things I wanted you to talk about is this article that you'll be printing or Publishing in next week's Insight News on Joy Reid. And I'm hoping that you can make the connection as you hear the motive and the output that Crystal is bringing. There's a connection to the whole need for us to control our narrative and to be owners and acknowledge and elevate our information systems. What are your thoughts, Haley Taylor Schlitz?
Right. Well, thank you again for having me. As I listen, Crystal, to your story and look at your impressive books, I'm a bookworm. So when you pulled it up and you showed all of the details and thought that you put into it, I'm in love. So I'm definitely going to be doing more research on that. But just like Al said, I definitely hear a connection. What's been on my mind this week is about Joy Reid and the cancellation of her voice and her platform, and hearing you about your publishing company. I definitely see the connection. I keep looking over here because the article I wrote is right here. So I do think that there's a paragraph and a half roughly that's pretty relevant, Crystal, to you and what you share. So I'll just read it that way you guys can all kind of get in my mind space here. This paragraph and a half says, Joy Reid's show may be gone, but our power isn't. We still have the ability to determine where we place our attention, our money, and our influence. So if we're truly upset about MSNBC's decision, let's do more than just talk about it. Let's stop giving these networks our loyalty when they have made it clear that our voices are only welcome when it's convenient for them. Let's commit to supporting the Black-owned and independent media outlets that are fighting every day to ensure our stories are told, not just in moments of crisis, but always. So I love that. I see that's where I see the direct link. In my article talks, as you can tell, about not just Joy Reid's platform being taken away from our communities and the stories that she would share and highlight of our experiences, our success, and also the tragedies, but also, we should not just use this as a moment of outrage, but also a moment to lean into Black-owned and minority-owned media outlets. And media is not just MSNBC. Media is, authors and publishing companies, music, like the conversation with Al McFarlane, things like this are media outlets and that are Black-owned and highlight our stories and our voices. And we should lean into those and place our loyalty in those. So like I said, I'm super excited to hear your story and your books and your mission. I absolutely love it. I love the attention to detail. And I think that this is the exact kind of platform and companies that my article was talking about, the things that we should lean into. So I'm just super happy you're here. And like I said, as a bookworm too, definitely a tab open right now with your books.
I love that, Haley. Okay, so there's, as you know, I'm listening to you, speak, and thank you so much for sharing that too, because it's very spot on. And you know what I carry with me? I chat with, folks, whether they're strangers or friends, and lately in the environments that we've been exposed to, just largely as a country, the message that I continue to extend is like, it's important to observe and not absorb. Okay. Because we have a lot of work to do. And if we're distracted, if we are, so sensationalized that we can't actually get the real work done, so it can usher in those changes that you're describing, then we're operating with what feels like one arm behind our back, right? Yeah. So I appreciate that messaging because it's in line with my way I think this.
Yeah, no, your work and your voice is particularly important right now. This is definitely a time where I feel like a lot of people are absorbing, really taking it to heart what's going on and getting deflated from it. So I think things like your publishing company really just show the resilience of communities since the beginning of time and the success that we've had, because oftentimes, like even as a 5th grade history teacher, what's taught about our minority groups is oftentimes draining for the students, draining for the communities, hearing a lot of the tragedy, which is so important to talk about and discuss because it's shaped and caused where we are now, but also our success has too. So I really love this highlight on the positive elements and including their stage, their journey, their humanity. I love it. Very timely, always timely. I love it.
Yeah.
So Crystal, you've taken an entrepreneurial path. Why?
It's funny. Up until now, my husband's like, you if you would have met me a year and a half ago, I'm like, entrepreneur. No. It's not, I would have never described it as my ethos. And actually, I truly wouldn't describe it as my ethos now. I truly feel that I'm just a conduit. frankly, to be as honest as I possibly can, I'm just a channel for these phenomenal voices. I mean, I only showed you Chevalier. We're talking George Bridgetower. He was, a child prodigy who played alongside Beethoven. He was so incredibly talented. Beethoven himself dedicated what is still considered today as the most complex piece of violin ever written. And he dedicated it to George. Well, they had a falling out over a woman. George refused to apologize. So Beethoven removed the dedication and gave it to some other guy named Kreutzer. But the funny, you can't make this stuff up. Kreutzer goes, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing here, but I don't know what you thought, Beethoven. I don't know what you thought, Ludwig, but this is too complex for anyone to play. He could not play it, even though the dedication had been moved to him, but it's not true. Because George could, right? So we're talking, juggernauts. Listen, the work that's happening is tectonic. And actually, it's going to be in cohort form. I started with Black Voices. We are going to be hitting cultures all over the world, partnering with thought leaders to make sure that we get their voices right as each collection drops, okay? There's going to be, cartoons that are modern in the sense that makes the tie and the historical significance to what actually happened in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, wherever they're living, okay? But so, yeah, I wouldn't say an entrepreneur. It doesn't feel that way to me. I just feel like I have to be the voice at this point because
that sounds like you're saying it just feels natural.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, natural is entrepreneurial.
I
owning the connections that we create between us and for us, and our ability to do business with each other and with the world.
Yeah.
Let me bring my communications master, Indugo Yusef Mgeni. We've talked on a couple of things. Number one, this particular specific work that Crystal is bringing to the market, and Haley's commentary on the systematic derailing of Black voices in white spaces. Yusef, you and I go back forever, talking about the need for the emergence and the permanence of Black institutions and Black media in particular. What are your thoughts and feelings, Yusef?
Well, the internet is exploding with commentary about Joy Reid's dismissal, Alex Wagner's dismissal, and it appears that MSNBC is terminating the contracts of most of their employees of color. And one can't help but wonder how much pressure from the Trump administration, right-wing media, and conservative critics contributed to these dismissals. Even MSNBC's on-air reporters, Rachel Maddow, has the most popular cable television show in the country, and she was very critical of MSNBC for releasing Rachel Maddow and Alex Wagner, and said the release of the two prominent on-air personalities of color was indefensible. And I think she was absolutely correct. We've also seen recent attempts by the new leadership in the FCC to try and crack down on any disagreements with the Trump agenda by way of the media. And what we have, Al, is the making of a constitutional crisis coming out of the White House.
Jonathan, jump in. Unmute, Jonathan.
Yep. I was like, I should unmute. That would help. So one of the things that I think is really important is looking at this specific area. It's communication. Communication is the key. It's how the word gets out. It's how knowledge gets transferred. And it is in a variety of areas and connected to the arts. You have the people who are leaving. Lester Holt is leaving. I mean, some people are leaving in protest. Some people are leaving because they've been dismissed. But across the spectrum, you have it happening on different platforms. You have it happening in different areas. You also can look at the Kennedy Center and what's been done there. I got a Morehouse brother who works there, and it's just, I'm praying for him every day and checking in on him because it is atrocious. And for them to just take that over And the reaction has been people are canceling their shows. Issa Rae canceled her shows. Other performers have gone and not been there because of the fact that this is not the way you do business. It is also, it is not the elimination of DEI. That's one of the things that I think needs to be kind of understood a little bit better, because where we were was DEI for white people. What they're returning to is DEI for white people. We're going ahead and putting people in positions, actually what they think of as DEI, people who are not qualified into positions instead of qualified Black and brown people, instead of qualified women. And that's what you're seeing a lot. So Crystal, you're exactly what we need. We need to keep getting these stories out here. We need to keep translating that and helping our community and the broader community. They need to know that that is happening. We've been doing some work with the Schubert Club. I'm on the board of that, and reframing what classical music is, because of the fact that it's traditionally just Chopin. It's traditionally just Tchaikovsky. And you've got Scott Joplin. You've got all of these other performers, composers. You've got Chevalier. You've got people who need to be represented. And that's the thing that the pushback is going on. We're changing the narrative, and people just need to see that more.
Crystal's got to check out, I think. Crystal, thank you so much for being here. What a wonderful conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to talk with you guys, and looking forward to connecting again.
And people can find your books where?
Oh, yes, of course. BeretPublishing.com. We are on all of the social media platforms as well, just as Beret Publishing. So please, by all means, go check us out. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can find me as well on any of the platforms. I would love to connect and collaborate. But look out for more magic, you guys, because there's a lot more to come. So thank you.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. And what a wonderful conversation it is. I'm going to continue now with Brother Yusef Mgeni and Brother Jonathan Palmer. And I mentioned several topics today, and we can go into these now, or you can move the conversation other places if you'd like to. But a couple of things on my mind, and we shared some notes about the Democracy Now! Article on education arson. Trump moves to abolish the Department of Education amid a broader attack on public schools. We just talked a little bit about Joy Reid, but the third topic was two other topics. John Hope Bryant says DEI is dead and Black people having their wrong argument. And we may have a piece of the video. I don't know if we have that video that we can share, Jared, or not. If we do, put that up and we can talk about it. If not, we can just have the conversation. And the last thing was about civil rights groups suing the Trump administration over anti-equity executive orders. Yusef, jump in. Any of those topics do you want to comment on?
Well, I mentioned earlier, Al, that we have the makings of a constitutional crisis coming out of the White House, and we have a president who is overreaching his powers far more than many of the previous presidents combined have attempted to do. For the younger listeners in our audience or those who may not follow politics, let me simply explain that the Constitution created three branches of government: the executive branch, the White House and the administration, the legislative branch, both houses of Congress, and the judicial branch, the court systems in the United States. And we have a president who is attempting to steamroll both the legislative and the judicial branches of the government by implementing executive orders, 60 in total so far, throwing them against the wall to see which ones will stick. And we were so blessed to have Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison on the program previously to discuss lawsuits which he and 16 other states' attorney generals have filed against President Trump and his administration for the illegal, unconstitutional, reprehensible attempts to cease federal funding, which has been allocated by Congress, which the executive branch does not have the authority to do, seeking to terminate employees, programs, the U.S. Agency for International Development, top officials in the Defense Department, and other branches of the federal government. His popularity is taking a nosedive, and many top government officials are resigning rather than carry out personal vendettas or grudges or actions. Many agencies who formerly, government agencies who were independent, are now have sworn loyalty to Trump and are following whatever executive orders or instructions they are being given. Education, the military, the armed forces, the Federal Communications Commission, the U.S. Department of Education, which I think we're going to talk about more in depth in a minute, which is another classic example. The co-founder of the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, is now the United States Secretary of Education. She's a conservative Republican philanthropist, got no background in education. And Trump has publicly announced his plans to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. Now, in truth, the U.S. Department of Education only provides 7 cents out of every dollar in public education or charter schools, which are also public education. But his attempts to dismantle the education department are not only going to hurt traditional public schools, but charter schools, which have been the darlings of the GOP, the Republican Party, since their inception right here in St. Paul, Minnesota, okay, under Governor Rudy Perpich and Mayor, who was the little guy from West 7th Street, Jonathan, whose name I can't remember, who went to RAP and is now the head of the faculty at Hamline University, was more worried about what the Pioneer Press was going to say about him in the morning than what historians are going to say 50 years from now. He was the council member for West 7th and then became the mayor, served 1 term, and then was promptly
Jim Scheibel.
Jim Scheibel, thank you, Al, was given his walking papers. Jim Scheibel was the mayor. Kerman Gaines was the superintendent. And they created a charter school over on the east side, okay? The very first charter school in the country with Rudy Perpich's blessing, fresh back from Austria. But so we've got all this action taking place. We've got 2.2 million federal non-military workers being told that they could resign, that their jobs were not certain, that they would be paid and would receive benefits through the end of September with money that he does not have at his disposal. And the shakeup at the Defense Department over the weekend, where a brother who had 40 years of military war preparation experience was summarily dismissed. And we're seeing this throughout the federal bureaucracy. The nonprofit community is reeling because he wants to get rid of National Public Radio. He wants to get rid of the Public Broadcasting Service. He wants to prevent historically Black colleges and universities from teaching Black history, okay? And he believes that anything that has anything to do with race is going to make white people feel uncomfortable, and therefore it should be banned. More than 6,200 books were banned in institutions of higher education, public schools, and libraries over the last 2 years. Okay, 6,200 books, the lion's share of which were books dealing with race. And anything that has even smells like race is considered critical race theory, which 90% of the people attacking it cannot adequately define or explain. Now, what's the constitutional crisis? We have a president who's trying to make decisions summarily and independently of both the legislative and the judicial branch. He's fired immigration judges. 14 immigration judges lost their jobs. You know what the backload is for immigration cases in the United States? 2 million cases backed up, and he's firing judges. He's firing people who were appointed by Biden, who were appointed by Barack Obama. And here's the kicker. He's appointed more appellate court judges than any other president in history. and only 1% of the cases that are heard in federal appeals court go to the Supreme Court, which is now stacked 6-3 in favor of our national crash test dummy. I'm sorry, our president and our assistant president, Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet.
Isn't it the other way around?
Which I think it's a shared responsibility, okay, and a shared definition. Elon Musk is accused of writing most of the executive orders that the president is signing and tossing against the wall to see which ones will stick. Now, our president is a master of distraction. He's hired the co-author of Project 2025 as one of his cabinet officers, okay? He has hired a man, it would be a disservice to call him a right-wing, extreme right-wing extremist. This man is to the right of Attila the Hun, and he is now the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, okay? He wants to fire all of the FBI agents who were involved in doing research on the January 6th interruption. Set aside the fact that he pardoned summarily 1,600 people who were serving up to 23 years in prison for their role in the January 6th insurrection. One of the Proud Boys was arrested yesterday in Washington, D.C., who was pardoned, who had a 22-year prison sentence. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, it is absolutely unbelievable. And one of the cases filed by the AGs appears to be headed for the Supreme Court. And many of the appointees who have halted or put a stop to some of the president's executive orders are Republicans who were appointed to the bench by Donald Trump during his first term. You know, and they're basically saying, look, even Ray Charles could see that these things are illegal, they're unconscionable, they're reprehensible, and they're far beyond the constitutional scope of the president's duties and responsibilities. So when I say a constitutional crisis, we have one of the three branches of government, the executive branch, trying to supersede the judicial and the legislative branches. And several of the judges have told the White House, wait a minute, you're disregarding our orders to halt or cease the implementation of these executive orders that are being written by the assistant president, signed by the guy I mentioned earlier, and you're going ahead with the plans and implementing them anyhow. You can't do that. You know, that's illegal. That's against the law. And so we have a Republican congresswoman who's introduced two bills, one to make Trump's birthday a federal holiday, the other to allow Trump to run for a third term. Another piece of legislation was introduced to call a constitutional convention to allow him to serve for life. And it takes 34 Republican governors to call a constitutional convention. And we're 3 or 4 shy of that. So this notion of the midterm elections, when many of the governor's races and the congressional seats are going to come up, is going to be critical in terms of whether or not the Elon Musk money, he spent $17 million to get right-wing Republicans elected to the House and the Senate to see if they're going to be able to buy more seats. The Republicans have a 3-vote majority in the House of Representatives right now, and there are going to be special elections in 3 districts, which could defeat any majority that they currently enjoy. So he's got a trifecta right now, the Senate, the House, and the White House, and he's got the Supreme Court 6-3. So a constitutional crisis could undermine the very fabric and the foundations of democracy as it has been written, created, voted upon, and implemented in this country. And it's not just here. He's told white South Africans they will enjoy full United States citizenship if they want to immigrate to the United States, and all they have to tell the customs officials is, we believe we've been discriminated against by the black majority in South Africa, even though whites own 85% of the land.
Right.
They're free to immigrate to the United States and enjoy sort of like the right of return or the dual citizenship for Americans. Every Jewish person automatically becomes a citizen of Israel. And Trump, seeing that, and he said on the campaign trail that this may have been the last election that white people would be able to win in the United States. And he wants to buttress. We've seen different groups of people. Eastern Europeans, for hundreds of years, were not considered white people until the birth rate in the majority white population in this country began to decline. And they had to continue to add. Now they've added East Indians, they've added Asians, they've added people who were never considered white throughout history, who now have magically, paid the price of the ticket for emigrating to the United States.
And the price is anti-blackness.
Right.
They had to subscribe to the theory of white supremacy. James Baldwin wrote an essay called "The Price of the Ticket," and I would beg people to read it because it is so prescient, so true. So we've got all this mess going on, and a lot of people are distracted. A lot of people are getting worn out. They're tired, of all the bad news, of all the executive orders, and they've thrown up their hands and they just say, "Look, I don't know what to do." Well, the NAACP has three tenets: education, advocacy, and litigation. And again, kudos to Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and the other 16 states attorney generals who are legally contesting these actions, not only to dismantle the Department of Education on citizenship birthright, on the elimination of DEI, on the banning of anything that even smells like it's 1/364th black. I mean, we're black to the definitions they had of what constitutes a Negro in Louisiana, during slavery. If you had 1/364th drop of blood in your body, you were considered a Negro. And that's the approach they're taking to anything that is pro-black or that encourages black people to take pride in our history, our legacy, our resilience, and the very fabric of our culture.
Let me jump in, Yusef. This is the conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm Al McFarlane. Thank you for listening. That was the voice of Ndugu Yusef Mgeni. Also hosting today with me, Jonathan Palmer. Jonathan, before I have you come in, let me share one of the information pieces that we have. This is an article by Stacy Brown, who is the national correspondent for the Black Press of America, NNPA, Newswire. And he writes, this is an article last week, that the Legal Defense Fund and Lambda Legal filed a federal lawsuit challenging 3 executive orders issued by President Donald Trump. According to the groups, the orders threaten rights and ability of organizations to provide vital social and health services. The lawsuit, the National Urban League v. Trump, was filed in the U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia. It claims that the orders violate the First and Fifth Amendments by targeting diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, DEIA programs, and transgender rights. So the organizations involved, National Urban League, National Fair Housing Alliance, AIDS Foundation of Chicago, argue that the orders severely limit organizations' ability to provide critical services such as HIV treatment, fair housing support, and employment assistance. These restrictions, they say, disproportionately harm people of color, women, LGBTQ plus individuals, people with disabilities, and those living with HIV. So the orders in question that he signed on January 20 and 21 are Executive Order number 14151, ends radical, quote unquote, radical and wasteful DEI programs and preferencing. Number 2, Order number 14168, quote, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. And then number 3, Order number 14173, quote, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. Well, we know where all that's going. Jonathan, what are your thoughts? What's your comments? And what do we need to know first, and what do we need to do secondly?
Well, first, let me. I'm smiling a little bit because that second order, where he went ahead and declared that people were the gender they were assigned at conception, meant that everybody is actually now female. At conception, biologically, everybody is female, and the male differentiates over time. So essentially, he just went ahead and declared everybody female. That speaks to the point of this administration. They have no idea what they're doing. They are taking shots in the dark and trying to see what they can wreck up and how much shock and awe they can do. The Doge and Elon Musk and those pieces that are aligning right now, they're having hearings, not hearings, but court cases where judges are asking who is actually in charge of Doge. Trump has said it was Elon, but then he said Elon isn't actually a government employee. He's an advisor. And they're playing a hide and seek game with all of this to shuffle around and try to do as much damage as possible before the legislation starts coming back, before people start going ahead and putting the litigation in place to stop these things. All of this is really to elevate white supremacy. And people don't like to talk about that because when you say white supremacy, what they think is people in sheets burning crosses and neo-Nazis and stuff like that. They don't understand that there's another level of white supremacy, which has to do with dismantling education systems so that people don't know about where our country has been. The banning of books in Florida so that people can't read history and understand we've been here before. We've been through all of this stuff before. So it's a systematic approach they're taking to elevate white people, to elevate white supremacy, and to put that in place. And what you're seeing a lot of with Congress, especially with the Republicans, is nobody wants to jump out first. They're watching this to see where is the point. I'm watching Republicans bend over backwards to criticize the action and praise Donald Trump. Oh, this is not the thing we want to do. This is terrible. But Donald Trump is a really brilliant guy, and I really like him. He issued this order, and he's such a strategic thinker. But this order is going to go ahead and destroy the very fabric of our humanity. But he's really great, and we should get that. So the constitutional crisis that Yusef is talking about, I don't know that we're coming to it. It feels like we're already there because of the fact that you've got the Republicans in the House and in the Senate who are now conflicting with each other over the budget. And that's laying the groundwork for them to fight. They're getting railed at town halls as they go on, and people are giving them pieces. And now they're coming back and getting into trouble with their constituents. So this stuff is going to implode. And the question is, are we going to have an infrastructure left after it, or will they have done enough damage? That whole Elon had a whole thing about tell us what you did over the weekend and justify. And there was panic going through about that until they got to the Trump appointees. I think it was Kash Patel was the first one who said, you don't have to pay attention to this. So it was an order until they got to Kash Patel, Kristi Noem, and the ones like that. Then suddenly there's a question around.
Yeah, defense. I think defense said, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, I talked about the question of John Hope Bryant saying DEI is dead, and we've got a couple of clips. There was about a 5-minute clip. I don't want to play 5 minutes of it, but I'm going to do the first minute to set it up, and then we'll stop. We can talk a little bit, and then we'll play the last minute. Maybe we'll hear his conclusion at that point in time. Let's check this out first. Go ahead.
What about DEI now? When you see major companies, Fortune 500 companies taking hits and some taking gains because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some would say like, yo, we going AI. I don't want to feel obligated to do certain things, but for the certain people who have been oppressed, suppressed, and forgotten, we need our jobs. We need equal rights. What's your stance on that?
I don't care about DE&I. I've said in op-eds in Time Magazine, Black Enterprise, and Fortune, you want to kill it, kill it. It's already been weaponized. It's been made political and emotional and it's dead. DE&I as a program is effectively dead. I don't care about DE&I. I love diversity. And I love math because it doesn't have an opinion. And God has a sense of humor.
Right.
So for the first time in history, this country cannot succeed without all of us.
Let's break it there. Let's stop there, Jared, and maybe scroll towards the end. Maybe there's a conclusion we can hear. But Yusef, what do you think? Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, DEI was a broken promise, Al.
And we can, yeah.
DEI was a broken promise without any accountability. After George Floyd's murder, billions of dollars were committed to dealing with racial injustice, social justice, access to resources, access to opportunity. And yet we've seen a few million come through the spigot. And many of those brave promises for massive change were forgotten. So it was very easy to abandon them because they had not been implemented to begin with. Who has been the major beneficiary of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs? White women, okay? So the president is hurting his daughters, his mother, his sister, his aunts, his granddaughters. White women are going to be the first to be significantly harmed. Yes, it will affect people of color. It will affect other marginalized groups. It will affect LGBTQ&A communities. It will affect the handicapped. It will affect senior citizens because Elon Musk considers Social Security and Medicare as DEI programs, and they want to slash those.
Yusef, but is it maybe a question of the veil being lifted and the administration, the Christian nationalist white philosophy finally revealing itself for what it is and saying we don't have to play the semantics and we're telling you who we are and that's just the way it is. Jonathan, what do you think? Unmute, Jonathan.
I'm sorry. I think it's definitely the veil being lifted and it revealing what has been there all along. Mm-hmm. I'm going to disagree, though, with John. I don't think DEI is dead. I think these programs may be pulled back. But what you're seeing right now, there are companies that value it, that are going ahead. Costco is one of those that is keeping up and maintaining that. The Arizona Tea, they're doing that. There's others that are continuing on and maintaining that. And those that aren't, they're feeling it. Target said they were going to, not support DEI. So the Pride Festival removed them as a sponsor. They still wanted to be a sponsor, but we're not going to do the stuff anymore. $50,000. Pride said, thank you very much. No. Raised $83,000 in 24 hours to replace that. And so what you're seeing is efforts that show if you're not going to go ahead and support the things that we find important, people are going to walk and we'll take our dollars elsewhere. And that's what hurts them. What you're seeing is there are companies who are going to stand up for it and say this is real and this is important and it has to go. This is like the truth has come to light and people recognize that DEI, like Black history, is something important until we get to the point where we recognize Black history is just history. It's Black history because it's been suppressed so much, but it's actually just history. And it's something we should be recognizing and celebrating. And that's where the fight's going to go. Why are you leaving this person out? Why are you minimizing this contribution if history is just history?
I'm reminded when the workers at U.S. Steel went to the chairman of the company's board of directors' home and threatened to burn down the steel mill. And he said, listen, would you do us a favor and make sure you burn it all the way to the ground because we have wonderful insurance. And what you folks fail to understand is that we're not in the business of making steel. We're in the business of making money, okay? And anything that you can contribute that's going to make us some money, we support it. And DEI is good for the bottom line, okay? John Hope Bryant pointed out that 70% of the gross domestic product in this country is consumerism. People are buying. And when you look at the share of the groups who DEI was allegedly intended to benefit, those are the marginalized groups: seniors, low-income people, people of color, women, people with disabilities, LGBTQ&A folks. And if those folks engage in selective buying campaigns and only shopping where they feel welcomed, valued, and respected, then certain companies are going to benefit, and other companies are already taking a hit. And let me say this: Republican legislators, when they go back to their home districts for a congressional break, are catching living hell, okay, from their constituents, from the people who elected them, discussing the ways in which these executive orders coming out of the White House are harming them personally. And they're saying, look, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. We are not going to support it. You've got farmers who sold, billions of dollars of crops to the U.S. Agency for International Development, saying, wait a minute, didn't we put this boy in the White House? And now you're taking, our livelihood, you're taking food off our table and our livelihood, and you think we're going to vote for you and for him in another term? Come on, let's be real. This stuff is so stupid. It hurts everybody. Even rich people are saying, wait a minute, my stocks are down, my dividends are down, my profits are down. What's going on here? Okay. And President talking about, well, it may hurt a little bit for a little while. No, it's going to hurt a lot for a long time. We imposed a 10% tariff against China. What did the president of China do? He imposed a 15% tariff against the United States. Duh. I can't imagine where that came from. Why would he do that? We were trying to do him a favor. Sure. It's absolute insanity. It's absolute insanity.
Part of the thing is that people, the people who are in the MAGA cult and who voted for Donald Trump did not realize that DEI was not just black and brown people. It's disabled people. It's orientation.
Jonathan,
so
they're listening
to
they're listening to a lot of blues music in the trailer park, believe me.
They are. And even in some of those rich communities where their daughter's job got canceled and the pieces got pulled away because Doge decided to close down that organization. So there are a lot of white people who are realizing this isn't just a black thing. And this all goes back to, in terms of what's happening with China and other places in Canada and Panama, we're picking fights and trying to expand the land. It goes back to this idea of American exceptionalism. And the thing is, Americans are just exceptional at being racist.
Jonathan, is there an answer, a strategy among many that involves our ability to do more business with each other? One of the things that has been talked about over the past month is a FUBU month, For Us By Us month, where we, with intention and publicly, find ways to spend money with Black businesses. We try to both identify, highlight, and grow the economies that we originate and that support us. And the extension of that is what can happen between Black people on a global scale, because the problem is not just here. It's a problem of the internationalization of supremacist collecting of power. Is there a strategy that is global that we should be about? We've got 30 seconds. Yusef, you first.
Well, I think we need to do selective buying and shop where we feel welcome, valued, respected, and where we get high quality service.
Brothers, we've got to stop it right there. We're out of time. Thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We will see you next time. Take care.
Stay.